Hello, this is the first of two videos for Chapter 6, Data Validation Techniques. You may have noticed we skipped Chapter 5, the pivot tables and pivot charts. There's no need for us to cover that chapter, so we're going to go right into Chapter 6. Also, Chapter 6, we're really just covering the first part of it, which deals with validation or data validation in tables only. So up through the first hands-on exercises. Okay, the hands-on exercises uses a file called A06H1 Bank. I'm going to open that in Access and show you these concepts about data validation in tables. The data validation that we're talking about here is done in table design area with the properties of a field. So I'm going to open up a table and show you what they're talking about here. I'm going to open up the customer table. I'll just right click on it, go straight to design view. So here you see the fields that make up the customer table, and along with their corresponding data types. These just happen to all be text fields. So the area we're really interested in is down at the bottom here. It's called field properties. Remember, the field properties are the ones showing in the bottom are the ones for the field you have selected at the top. So for instance, customer ID is the current field, so we're looking at the properties for that field. If I choose first name, you can see the properties change a little bit depending upon the data type. But anyway, this is the area that we're going to focus on. And matter of fact, the first 7 or 8 of these properties are the only ones. Field size, format, input mask, caption, default value, validation rule and text, and then a required field. Those are what we're concerned with in this particular part of the chapter. Some of these are self-explanatory, so let me start with the easiest one here, the required property. This one is set to yes. So what the required property means is when a user enters data or updates data in this particular table for this field, they are required to enter a value into this field. So a lot of times you want to set required to yes, because for most fields I would say you want a value in it. Now there are some fields where you don't care if they put a value, and then you can set the required property to no. But whenever you build a table and set up your fields, you need to look and decide whether you want the person to have a value in there, or if it's possible that that field could be left blank. For this customer table, I would say first name, last name, address, city, state, zip would all be required fields. Phone number, and depending on the business, maybe or maybe not. So that might be the only one here that I would say would be possible to maybe be a required no. Okay, so that's the required property. Let me move on to a property called the default value. The default value property, which is also down here in the field properties area. And again, remember we're in table design. The default value is for fields where you know that the value that's going to be typed into these fields when data is added is going to be a certain value all the time. So for instance, in this particular case, this customer table, maybe you're a small business here in Madison. You might default the city field to Madison and the state field to Wisconsin. That way it helps the user or the person entering the data doesn't have to type those fields in. They can type over it. So if a customer was from, say, Sun Prairie, they could type that over the city Madison. But this is really an aid to speed up data entry, and to also, then there's not a chance for typing here. Here's how you do it. Let's say we wanted to default value the field city. Make sure city is chosen here. move down to the default value area and just type in Madison. When you move to the next area, Access automatically puts in double quotes. Okay, so that's the default value. Again, not all fields would need a default value, or it would be a good candidate for one. First name, last name, and address. Everybody's going to be different, so those are not something you would have a default value for. City, state, possibly. Zip code, probably not. People are probably from different zip codes. Phone number, definitely not. So some of the fields are set up for that. Okay, let's move on to another property. That's a couple properties here that go together, are validation rule and validation text. Now the example they use in the book is, let me see, I'm going to move to a different table. I'm going to go to the loans table for this one. Close customer table. I'm going to open up the loans table. If I double click on it, it opens it up in data sheet view. To do this stuff, to set these properties, you have to go to design view. So I'm going to click design right there. The interest rate. Okay, so validation rule and validation text. This company says there can't be an interest rate entered over 15%. So the validation rule is it has to be less than or equal to 15%. If I make sure I choose the field up here, interest rate, move down to validation rule, type in my rule, less than or equal to, 0.15, that's 15%. The validation text is really the error message that comes up when this validation rule is broken. So we could say something like, the interest rate maximum is 15%. Okay, so that's my validation rule and text for this field. I can go test that now. It's always a good idea to test things as a programmer when you make changes. So I'm going to flip over to data sheet view. It's going to prompt me to save the table first because I did make some changes here, and I'll click the yes button. No data, you can usually click yes on this. Okay, so here's that interest rate field that I just put a validation rule on. You'll notice almost all of them, or all of them, are under 15% right now. But I'm going to try to type in, say, a 20%, or 22%, I guess is what the book example they give. So 0.22. Now if I tab to a new field, I get the validation text. The interest rate maximum is 15%. So that validation rule is at the field level. As soon as I tried to leave that field, and if I have an invalid value, something that doesn't meet the validation rule, this error message pops up. Okay. I can click on OK, and then type in, oh really, I wanted, it's 10%. Okay, so now that is okay. It passed the validation rule. It's going to let me do that. Okay, this is the end of the first video. I'll pick up with the rest of this part, or this chapter